and I'm going to shape up where we were proposing to go together. So I'm Heather Equinos. I'm with Co-Creative. And while we do offer courses now and again through Co-Creative, my usual day-to-day role in Co-Creative is to support multi-stakeholder collaborations, networks that are focused on some kind of systemic change in the world. And today with me is Lucette. Lucette, you want to say a word or two about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lucette Jaimes. I am joining from Boulder. I also work with Co-Creative, and I love focusing on creating spaces for people to make decisions together, to create together, to see a possible future together, and also look into what is needed there for us as leaders to develop so we can be more collaborative. So it's great to be here.
So here's what we had cooked up for this session. Some you'll hopefully recognize because we stated them to be the course outcomes for this workshop. So this is about working with difference, leveraging creative tensions in these spaces that we find ourselves in, these multi-stakeholder collaborations. We're working with people that come often with different value sets, different perspectives, different ways of being, doing, thinking in the world, and sometimes that creates tension. And we've found ways, really working with this polarity thinking lens to support groups to um, uh, sort of find a way forward together. And so we've really designed this course based on some practices that we found useful in those kinds of scenarios. And so we intend to work with sort of like tools to help us understand people's different motivations, particularly motivations around fears that might be sort of driving their behaviors. We also wanted to spend some time mapping different value dynamics or mapping polarities, and also starting to differentiate between things that are often sort of perceived as problems to solve and maybe how we could shift mindsets, our own way of thinking about these things, to think about them a little bit more as like a way to leverage different polarities. And then we're offering up a few different practices to help groups get unstuck and also reframe things when it might be experiencing that in a group space. And also ways to sort of use polarities to drop sort of a layer deeper and support people to find ways to integrate what might be perceived as mutually exclusive values into actually like better, more resilient, more robust kinds of solutions that are in support of their goals together. So those are the learning outcomes, and I'm also simultaneously showing the flow. And mostly I just wanted to lift up there that we'll have two breaks. One's about 10 minutes and one's about 5 minutes. So we're also trying to attend to our bio needs too as we work through this. So I'm gonna, or maybe Lizette, is it possible for you to grab the mural link that and drop it in the run sheet? I have it copied there.
Yeah, let me do that right now.
Thank you so much. So as you probably saw in the email from our colleague Melissa Darnell, we're going to use Mural today. And there's a couple of different approaches to it. If you're happy to be in Mural, great. We're welcoming you to join us in Mural. And if you would like to use it to also create things, mostly like using Post-it notes, we welcome you to do that. And if Mural's just not your thing, you don't like it, it's okay. I'll be screen sharing and we'll also be using the chat to drop prompts. And so feel free to set that aside and not use it if that's your preference. If you do choose to use it, I wanted to give you a few tips in case you're newer to using this particular tool. It's a giant whiteboard essentially. And so there's a couple ways to find your way around the board. One is there's a, a navigation bar in your bottom right that, especially there's like a little map icon that gives you a sense of the whole entire landscape and can support you to find your way around that landscape. Or we've set up a board outline for you. And so that's up here in the top right-hand corner. So if you would like to follow along, right now we're in the mural tips section. So if you click on that, it'll drop you into the section that we're working on. Or a really fast way to find your way around the board is to click on my icon or to click on Luzette's icon at the very bottom of the mural board. And then, as I mentioned before, we're primarily, if you do want to use it yourself, we'll primarily use it by asking you to drop a Post-it note on the board. And so there's two ways to approach that. One is you can simply double click anywhere on the board and a Post-it note will appear. You can start typing. And then click anywhere else in the board and that will set your Post-it note. Or you can get fancy with it and choose colors and shapes and yada yada. So if you want to do that, that functionality is on the left-hand side of the board, and there's a little Post-it note icon that you can click and then choose what you might want to drop on the board. So those are my fast mural tips. How are we doing so far? Okay? Very cool. All right. Who's that? I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we start, Heather, do you mind stopping the sharing? I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone, to invite you to turn your video on, if that's possible. And just to take a moment to see, we're here, 14 human beings in the screen, looking into exploring what it is to work with difference and leveraging some creative tensions. And so what I want to do now, as we all see each other and connect with the screen, is to create more space for connection. We're gonna have groups of 3, and Heather, if I did breakouts, so you don't have to hurry if you
Okay.
Yeah, we're ready for that. We're gonna do breakouts with 3 people, and I'm gonna invite you to think of a time, and I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. Think of a time when you initially disagreed with someone, but later came to appreciate their perspective. What was one value or concern they held that you didn't initially see or understand? I paste that in the chat. We're also seeing it in the screen. So right now, I'm just inviting you to reflect individually for a few seconds before I send you into a breakout with 2 other amazing people here for you to connect. All right. Any questions before I send you? Great. And you'll have around 9 minutes, 3 minutes each. Please be aware of the time. Enjoy. Welcome back all. I hope that you had a rich starting conversation. I would love to hear, we have a few minutes here. I would love to hear from a couple of you, what values were shared or emerged from your conversations.
Lizette, do you want us just to pop in or raise our hands?
Go for it. Unmute and share, please.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to attempt to try to summarize for my group, but just to say the values that I heard were curiosity, like deep curiosity and humility, and ability to be able to reflect on self. But if I can just say, there was something else that seemed to be coming up, which is that there was a being open to the provocateur who is challenging, whether it's like pushing back and saying, how about this, or think of it this way. And that could have come in a person, it could have come in a book, but there was something, or from an author through a book, but something about being open to that provocation and challenge. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Mary. Anyone else had a similar or a different experience or different values?
I can offer some of what I heard.
Yeah, go for it.
I heard a value of quality, values of efficiency, respect, productivity, and thoroughness.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. All of those so present in our collaborations, in our work, also in our even with myself, I have this showing up. Thank you both. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to Heather, who is gonna take us into in more introduction to creative tensions and seeing beyond the either or.
Right.
Mm.
So, if you want to follow along in the board yourself, you can always click on my face and end up right here. So I want to offer that Russ Gaskin and I did a webinar a couple months back that Melissa shared the link with to you in the introductory email to this course. I'm not going to cover the same content. That's there for you. And in many ways, that was sort of like a cognitive kind of approach to looking at polarities or creative tensions. We're going to come at it a little differently today. So if you're drawn to like the more of the theory and a little bit more of the sort of like conceptual frameworks, you might want to check out that session. It's available to you. We're going to sort of like drop in a different way in terms of looking at creative tension. So I'm not going to ask you to do this breathing exercise right now, but it is a helpful metaphor for thinking about both and as opposed to either or. So imagine you inhaled only. Like, we're going to get it's going to be problematic, right? Bad things are going to happen if we think we can just inhale. Same thing is true if we just imagined breathing as a problem we needed to solve by only exhaling. That's illogical, right? We know we need to manage both in this thing we do autonomically every few seconds, right? We know we need to leverage this polarity of breathing through inhalation and exhalation. It's a natural polarity. It works because both sides are essential over time. If we can do that well, we can thrive. If we don't do it well, we will not. We will die. However, it can sometimes be the case that we try to treat other polarities as though they're problems to solve, and we're only going to do one side of this interdependent pole or these interdependent values. So this is where we wanted to get a little bit more like application based than that webinar that we had done previously. And we were hoping you'd be willing to think about a frustration that exists. It could be work life, it could be out of work life, but something that's a little naggy, something that's frustrating you. And do a little bit of reflection here and think about what's the source of this frustration? How might it manifest emotionally, somatically, physically? And to just jot that down for yourself. We're not going to be asking you to share it in this whole big plenary space. We will invite you to share some snippet of it in breakout room in a moment. All right. So I believe Luzette has established some breakout rooms. This time we were suggesting maybe just partners, unless our math doesn't work out well. And so you might end up in a group of 3. But the hope was that you'd be willing to share some kernel of the frustration you identified. And then as a pair, see if there might be two legitimate values that might be in tension. So, we have some examples here. So if the tension, or excuse me, if the frustration is like, I'm going, maybe the thing that might be in tension, or what that frustration might reveal, is this polarity of like, you're deep in activity, but maybe not so much in rest. Or you can see some other examples here, like, I'm always having to be on for my team, but I also don't want to let anybody down. It might start to reveal a tension around these two interdependent values of like taking care of others or supporting others, and taking care of ourselves, or self-care. So the hope here is that as you share, you could have some thinking partnership to help you collectively identify what might be two value tensions that might be sort of underneath that frustration. And so you're not trying to solve one another's problems. We're really just trying to see, can we surface what might be some polarities related to that frustration? We welcome you to use your intuition. And if you're really feeling like, I'm not coming up with anything, we've listed a whole lot of polarities on the board just beneath where I was sharing my screen. So there's a whole lot of value pairs there that if you're really coming up empty, you can draw from that. Let me just pause, see, is this making sense? Okay, cool. All right. I think we have, it's not a huge amount of time. We're only going to be out there for like 8 minutes or so. Okay.
I'm ready. Enjoy.
Kate, it's so fun to get to spend so much time with you today.
I know, like basically half a day. I love it.
Welcome back, folks. Suzette and I got to pop around. We hope we weren't disruptive. It was mostly just like, we want to see what's going on and how much time people might need more of, and whether or not this is like creating echoes, positive echoes in amongst this crew. I'm curious if you noticed any patterns that might have weaved across your stories or your experiences of frustration. And it could really be anything, but we've offered some prompts there in terms of what might be patterns. Some of them might be cognitive things like, oh, there's this thing that a problem that we've been, or treating something like a problem, but maybe it's actually a polarity to leverage, or maybe it's a common emotion or some sensation in our bodies. Yeah.
Hi there. Yeah, hi, Vice. Yeah. In the two different breakout groups that I was in, I think there's a theme which I resonate with a lot, and I also brought to the conversation around husbands and partners and managing the differences, and then sometimes in our own personal worlds, the conflict can become more entrenched and polarized, and actually many of us are more reasonable at work and can perhaps see different perspectives. There was definitely a husband theme.
Yeah. Khan.
Well, I definitely am feeling I'm amongst a group of leaders because I feel an enormous sense of responsibility that we all carry. And whether it's about organization and workforce sustainability or world peace. So, there are a lot of things that sometimes are within our control and sometimes not, but we still feel the weight of it in terms of how much we care for the people that we work with or for.
Yep.
I've super enjoyed my first two conversations, and one theme that's present for me was like a tension and maybe a polarity that arises between like what we've been taught and socialized and like what the world is telling us things should look like and then the way they actually look. So there's been like we just had a meaningful conversation about the tension that can get created when life seems to show up in a way that's not the way the world has told us it's supposed to show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mary.
I don't know where my hand went on Zoom, but just wanted to share that in our breakout group, we quickly went to the place of like, or where we ended was, what are the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories we're immersed in that sustain those polarities, like around the tension of support and self-care, particularly as women at this stage in our lives, and the multiple fields of support that we feel we must uphold, take care of, tend to, etc. And that, and I guess just, because my work is in narrative change, I'm deeply curious about how we can make those narratives, I guess, more visible and disrupt that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Bit depressing, but overwhelming.
Thanks for being so transparent and also bringing some vulnerability into these small group conversations that we're actually talking about real struggle, especially around self-care and the responsibility of community care as one of the issues. Anybody else? Themes? Okay.
I'll add one. I don't know. It's not fully formed thought, but there's something here around, making things whole, right? So sort of, I don't know, cracks in the foundation and wanting to make things whole.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes along a little bit with what Han was talking about in terms of the sense of responsibility and caring, and by extension, trying to find wholeness in that.
Yep. Very nice. So one of the key pieces that we wanted to lift up, at least at this moment in time in the workshop, was that there's a couple of core concepts here that we hope land with you. One is that like not all of the challenges we experience in our lives are like problems we need to solve. But rather it's quite possible that they're actually more like ongoing tensions or ongoing polarities that ideally we can leverage or optimize. So sometimes we've seen groups try to approach things like, we have this problem. People aren't being accountable to one another. So we're going to build in all these mechanisms for accountability. When in fact, in my opinion, like that's not a problem to solve. It's something that we actually need to leverage better over time. We need to provide the right amount of support and the right amount of accountability in order to help that group like be its best self. Or same thing with like planning and implementation. It can't just all be about implementation. We also have to attend to that corresponding value. One that comes up regularly is like what a group needs and what an individual needs, or the individual needs of those group members. So again, this is something we can attend to both of these interdependent values as opposed to just trying to solve something. And then the other thing we just wanted to offer up was like our bodies, our beings can be really great barometers if we can listen to them. And notice like the sensations that we're experiencing, or those sort of like emotional activations that we get, that they could be cues for us to be like, oh, is this something that it's actually a polarity we need to attend to here? And maybe just sort of get curious. So it could be a cue for us to get curious. And I feel you, and I apologize, I forget who said it now, but like how we show up in a workspace might be different than how we show up in a family space. Like, so that's one of the things that I know I've been practicing more of, is like I notice those body sensations in a work setting and can activate that curiosity a lot faster there. So so that's one of those things. I know that's just part of my current practice, is like, how can I notice what's happening physically, those sensations, so that in all the spaces I'm in. Yeah, Kathy, I see your hand.
So I'm trying to figure out how to frame this, but especially in the United States right now, I am very aware of certain kinds of tension that are getting logic applied to them, or a sense of listening on both sides as what we should be going for. And I'm wondering, as you're describing this notion, which is a huge insight to me, not everything needs to be solved. How do you tell the difference between a tension that your body and spirit are responding to that is truly a threat versus a tension that is just a difference or something that could be generative? I'm not sure if I framed that well.
Can I give it a try here? Kathy, the question you're asking is super useful, and actually requires us to develop ability to be aware of that with our nervous system, develop a relationship with our nervous system. Because what happens is that our brain is constant, and our nervous system is constantly, that's how we are wired. We're constantly scanning for threat or reward. And our nervous system connects with all the organs in the body. So it could be as easy as an email that we don't like, that triggers our nervous system, and then we are like in threat. And in that moment, if we're not aware and we are familiar with how our nervous system reacts, we may literally take it as something that really is a problem to solve. When sometimes, if we have a practice, it's just as simple as take a breath and notice, why is this impacting me, right? So it requires, it's at several levels. It's at the nervous system level, it's at the emotional level. And then once you have that familiarity with your nervous system, you're able to choose, you co-regulate, you self-regulate, and then you choose an answer or a reaction, or actually instead of a reaction, an action that you are thinking about. Because sometimes in the face of the tension, it happens in our not in our conscious mind. So that's why when we're talking about polarities, it's very nuanced, because it includes our reactions that sometimes in the face of threat are not conscious. Just to close, to develop a relationship with our nervous system is key to help answer the question you just asked. And second, to develop a practice that allows us to act with choice rather than react without thinking. But it's a lifelong practice.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question, Kathy. All right. I think the next bit of work that we wanted to do together also kind of builds on what Kathy was just potentially another layer that I was hearing in Kathy's question about, like, sometimes we're in spaces where people are asserting positions that we don't agree with. And how do we work with that? So Luzette, can I shift it over to you? You want to pick it up? I can also screen share. You want me to still do that?
That would be great, because Kathy, your question is leading us to what I want to speak a little bit more about, which is when we are self-regulated and we notice that there are these tensions here, how do we understand people's motivations might help us get to what we need to do, solve a problem or leverage attention. So if you see here in the model that we use is the values iceberg. And what is beautiful about the iceberg is that it allows us to see what is, in the surface, but also go deeper and see what is beyond that surface. So usually in conversations, in our general dialogue, we tend to stay in positions. I just share my position. And what is a position? It's an assertion that might be competing or exclusive of other assertions. And that's why sometimes it's really hard to create some common ground and really embrace difference when positions are held strongly, because they seem like if they were conflicting. So when we are there, then we ask and we wonder, okay, well, if we are in these positions, how do we open up a space to further the conversation and see how do we find this common ground? So a good question to ask there is, what is this person or these other parties caring about? What do they want? What are they trying to solve for? And so we start going deeper into the layers and we start finding out their interest. Why do they want, what are they trying to solve for? And that opens up a space where we might understand a little bit more of each other. We would also try to understand whether the interest that this other person have, I may find valid or not. And in order to even go better into conversation, we go into another layer and we ask, okay, I'm not sure I think that the interest that this person have is valid, but I can ask a question. I can ask, why do you care about this? Why is this important to you? And usually that leads us to their values. And when we recognize people's values, there is like a moment where somebody feels seen and heard. So it's not like we started with a position that felt like a cut, an assertion, something sharp. We're going deep and we finally are able to touch something that sometimes feels quite vulnerable too. And it's something that somebody really cares about and is their values. And in that space, we're able to perhaps start finding mutually agreeable solutions, because I can see your value, I can see you as well, as the same way that you can see me and the things I care about. And usually, and this is our hypothesis here with the polarities work, is that values usually actually come in pairs. They don't necessarily come just one, because usually we need, as Heather mentioned earlier, if we're thinking about individual interests, but we are in an organization, we also think about the organization interests. So these are complementary or interdependent. They come in pairs. Or accountability and also grace, things that seem that are opposite, but they really aren't. And so when we are able to identify the pair that is in tension at a given situation, we can leverage that polarity and design more resilient solutions. Find that moment where we are able to embrace the difference, because we're able to get the values, the positives of both values. So I have an example here I want to quickly share just to make it more like landed. For example, when somebody is stuck in a position, they could say, in this case, people experiencing homelessness need to contribute a portion of their housing cost, period. And you go deeper and you understand what are their interests. Then this person, for example, this party said, I want people experiencing homelessness to have some skin in the game. That's important to them. But why? Because they have a strong value of personal responsibility. And if we think about personal responsibility and we do our work in polarities, we can understand that there might be in tension with others whose value is actually community responsibility. So if we're able to add the both personal responsibility and community responsibility, we might be able to design a space where our approach to solve the larger problem or not like to create a system that allows us to offer solutions that respond to both the personal responsibility and the community responsibility, That is key, and that's why polarities are so useful to have. So I want to share a story here. It's a case study where we're going to look into some polarized coalition where they had some conflict. This is a fictitious case, but and we hope it feels really real. And so the situation here is that a 15 organization coalition was formed to address climate resilience in a mid-sized metropolitan area. And so after around a year and a half, the coalition is kind of stuck, gridlocked. Some members are threatening to leave. You might, yeah, exactly. You might find different experiences, but that feel similar. And in this experience, we have three players. We have Dr. Rodriguez, who works with the Environmental Research Institute here, and he is data-driven. He focuses on comprehensive regional climate modeling. On our right here, we have Marcus Isaacs. He represents the community, the frontline communities that are emphasizing immediate local needs. They are experiencing the needs. And in the middle, we have the coalition director, usually sitting with one of us next to, trying to facilitate the collaboration. So we have these three players, and they have different positions, particularly Dr. Rodriguez and Marcus. And so from Dr. Rodriguez's position, what he's saying is that they really need to complete a regional assessment before they act, because he thinks they're wasting resources on piecemeal projects that might not even address the real vulnerabilities. He thinks that without proper data and coordinated planning, things can get worse, and that science needs to drive these decisions. On the other pole, we have Marcus, who is thinking, well, our community is living this, so people are flooding every year while you guys study the problem to death. And the community needs flood barriers and cooling centers now, not in 3 years, right? So we have this tension of data-driven planning that Dr. Rodriguez is offering and community-driven action that Marcus is offering. And so here I want to just first give you a moment to be with what I just said and highlight other deeper values that might be in conflict as well. Like, for example, Dr. Rodriguez is bringing scientific rigor, long-term effectiveness, comprehensive solutions, evidence-based decisions, while Marcus is looking at community, self-determination, immediate relief, lived experience, like environmental justice, right? So you can see how valuable all of them are. And the idea here is, how do we put those together in a way that help us build a holistic approach? And so when we're looking at this issue and this tension between these two parties, it's important to highlight how resistance often stems from fear of losing something deeply valued, as you could see in both Dr. Rodriguez sharing and in Marcus's sharing, right? So let's move a little bit ahead, Heather, because I want to show, what do you think that Dr. Rodriguez and Marcus are actually afraid of losing? We give some examples here, showing and highlighting how Dr. Rodriguez is concerned about resources being wasted or creating, worse approaches or worse consequences. And Marcus is more kind of like really preoccupied to lose the self-determination of their community. So I'm going to give you just a few moments to connect with the case I just gave you and imagine, why are they afraid of losing on each side? What do you think they're losing? And if you want, you could write directly in the mural, or you can just write it here in the chat. Wonderful. Wonderful. I invite you all to read all the things that people are sharing. Yeah, exactly. And as you write, and if you're done, if you're reading, I really invite you to imagine, yourselves in the shoes of either of these people, and connect to the fear that might be felt of, and the threat that can awaken in someone's body and mind, right? And beyond the concepts, these are things that we also need to learn how to bridge. For example, the sense of real urgency, the losing momentum and action, the systemic solutions and versus the harm reduction. All of these are really important and are just part of the entire system we're working with. Wonderful. Thank you all. So now I'm gonna ask you we're gonna start working with some application here. But we're gonna use the mural to capture this, and the invitation is for you to connect with an experience where you felt resistance in a colleague or a group member. And I'm gonna invite you to write down what they said or did in that moment. We're gonna come back to this later, but for now that we have connected with the energy of resistance, with the energy of the fear behind the resistance, I'm gonna show you, and Heather, if you could show us where the working space is. And if you're in the mural, please click on Heather's face in the bottom so you can be in your workspace. We have created spaces for you with your names, and we're inviting you to write this in the first column where your name is. So it's an experience where you felt resistance in a colleague or a group member. All right, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Let us know if you have questions.
And I did promise, if you don't want to use mural today, it's okay. Write it down for yourself somewhere else.
Totally. All right, so the good news is, if you haven't finished, don't worry. We're going to go on a break right now. We have 10 minutes. So we're going to be here 20 minutes past the hour. In my case here will be at 1:20.
My little hack in mural that says, record, Heather, because that is where I often fail. Coming back from breaks, forgetting to hit record again. All right. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to, for the rest of the session, we're going to do a little bit of toggling back and forth between our fictitious but very much grounded in real experiences we've had with coalitions or networks when there's some polarization that occurs, and your own real life experience. And so we wanted to explore a little bit deeper, like this sense of resistance that can often come up around polarities, and offer a tool that we found useful to help us explore the upsides and downsides of those interdependent values. So I'm in this zone called mapping a polarity on the mural space. And we wanted to play with this interdependent, what we're proposing is an interdependent value of both working from data-driven insights, like Dr. Rodriguez values, and also community-driven insight, which Marcus Isaacs was clearly noting the value of. So what you're seeing here is a polarity map. And what I would offer is for those of you that are happy to work in Mural, I invite you to drop Post-it notes and tell us from your perspective. We'll start on the upper left-hand quadrant. You can make your own Post-it note, or you can use our Zoom chat to write things down. And then finally, I'll also ask for some verbal contributions as well, if writing is not the thing you want to do right now. We're going to start in this top left quadrant, and I'm asking you, data-driven insight, it gets us good things. Good things come from really like the scientific rigor and the modeling capabilities that's available to us. So tell us, what are those good things that come from data-driven insights? Again, this is that value that Dr. Rodriguez has. Yeah. And for anybody who didn't want to write things down around the value that comes from data-driven insight, anything you want to speak into the room, I'm happy to write for you. Okay. So we know that we can get, we're not reinventing the wheel. We'll increase our effectiveness. We have confidence in our data. We might be able to use metrics and measure impact from any solutions we generate. There's some predictability that can come from it. There might be replicable models. Totally. We can avoid time wasting in the long run. Do these other things belong up here, or because it's okay, we're going to head down to this bottom quadrant. I'll let you move. There were two down here, and maybe they do belong down here. But just imagine we spend all this time focused on data-driven insight to the neglect of community-driven insight. We're not connected to the community and what they're experiencing day to day. We're lacking that knowledge. We're systematically over time valuing data-driven insight to the neglect of community-driven insight. We're likely to get some downsides. There's likely to be some negative consequences. Could you please add those to the bottom left quadrant?
Hey, Heather,
Yes.
I just want to clarify because the data-driven label doesn't seem to really suggest what he's doing. I'm going back to it. It says a regional assessment. So I'm assuming he's not going and doing like a modeling of what works, what doesn't, and all that. It's just really being grounded what the community's needs are. So it doesn't seem, like the way we're responding is a broader label of data-driven. So I just want to make sure we're responding to the right thing.
Yeah. We were trying to extrapolate a little bit and look at a common polarity, which is like working with, how about like science-based insights? Not, because I gather too, right? Like data-driven could be also inclusive of community-driven insights. We're talking specifically about modeling and that kind
Okay.
of non-community based. insight.
Okay. So I just want to be clear because again, I think it's creating more polarities than it is. So I just want to point that out. It creates kind of a certain stereotype or sort of assumptions about data-driven that could
Yeah.
be community-based. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Han, do you have a suggestion for a more clear label for this left poll?
Maybe like assessment-driven or something like that.
Yes.
Regional assessment-driven or something that reflects kind of the general.
I think that's such an important insight because communities or academia or other kinds of institutions can do any of these things.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not what they're doing, but where it's held.
And how it's done.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's also lifting up, if you do mapping with a group, sometimes we actually label the polls, but sometimes it's a little bit more intuitive and maybe the polls become clear after the mapping. But either way, in an ideal world, whatever we name the polls, land for everybody in that group as either positive or neutral. Because it's not going to be much of a tension if there's like, for example, like flexibility or emergence and rigidity. There's very few people who are going to be like, oh yeah, there's real value in rigidity. But like stability, that's something that's probably neutral or positive for folks. So it's great. And I'm so glad you raised that as like questioning what we named this poll name. Okay, so lots coming in. So if we're really focused systematically over time on this like regional assessment driven insights and modeling that comes from that, we might have a lack of community buy-in, or we're lacking some community context, or we're lacking emotion, or it could feel extractive, which then drives us to want to get what good stuff comes from like community driven insight that Marcus Isaacs his position is representing. So if you could start to fill out both the upside, but also the downside, because you're sensing into good things come from this particular value. And if we systematically over time focus on it to the neglect of the good that comes from a regional assessment driven insight, we're likely to also experience downsides. So I welcome you to fill in both the upsides and the downsides on this particular poll. Mm-hmm. Cool. So you can start to see like we're getting maybe a broader picture of the value that comes from both of these values, and also the downsides that could potentially come if we focus on one systematically over time to the neglect of the other. So while this conflict that we're experiencing in this collaboration, this might be one source of that conflict or resistance, but there's also probably other ones. And so we wanted to offer us just a few minutes to map maybe 2 other related values tensions that might be coming up in this particular scenario. And so if you look to the right, we have also a very common one in collaborations, which is around planning and action, or planning and implementation is sometimes another way that gets expressed. And also another common one, which seemed to be showing up in this scenario, which was around immediate response and long-term strategy. So our proposal was to do one more round of mapping, but in 2 groups. And we're actually going to also build out another part of this map, which we'll talk about when we are in small groups, which is helping to discern what might be some shared deeper fear that might be present for both of these parties. And also what might be like a shared greater purpose that is actually common across both of these parties. Are you willing to do this?
And Mary has a question.
Sorry, Mary. Yeah, thank you. My chat fell away. Apologies. Mary, what you got?
I'm not sure this no longer matters, but I was just thinking about what do you do as facilitators when, like, under the community-driven insight and the data-driven one, like what comes up for me is this underscored value tension around what knowledge counts. Like, so in that case, would you say, okay, if somebody brings that up, now let's talk about that as a different tension that we can explore, or there's a lot of assumptions kind of bubbling up on that. Anyway, just wondering how you would manage that, because there's deeper values there that are shining through.
Yeah. That's that could be a perfect example of like, hey, I'm noticing the only solutions that are getting considered to be valid are the ones that are where knowledge is produced from X community, and Y community's knowledge is not being valued. So like, can we acknowledge? So one quick intervention, maybe quick, depending on the group, is like, can we all agree that both of these communities sources are valuable sources of knowledge? And maybe that's enough to like shift it and be like, oh, right. And maybe that's not enough. Maybe that particular group actually needs to do a little bit more work around recognizing that as a thought pattern or a mindset.
Yeah, because there is that's a good point, because under this polarity work and the tensions is often harm, right? Particularly we're looking at this piece around data-driven insights. And in my experience in working with different groups, are often communities are feeling like they've been on the blunt end of any kind of assessment or research or et cetera, that's really caused harm, and it comes from that place. And so they see something like this, it's often an emotional piece. So yeah, I appreciate your point about what work might be needed or not needed in that moment and responding to it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Heather, would it be okay if I added something that just came up for me around that question? I'll make it brief. Mary, I think that's such a great question. And it makes me think a lot about just how, as facilitators, we create the conditions to move into this kind of work. But in my experience, and I'm thinking specifically about some work I do at the sort of between law enforcement and community, often what I find is a resistance to community-driven insight is that the insights will be in conflict, right? With like, they're going to hear things that feel painful or in conflict with their worldview. And something that's been really effective for me is just to invite the group to be thinking together about a moment when they feel like something's been designed for them, but without their input. And how even in this particular case for law enforcement, like, I mean, I could just come at them with a bunch of quote unquote best practices about what cops should be doing right now, right? but how much more they would value it if I actually engaged them in a conversation about their lived experience and their context and how that relates to the world that they're working in, and that there isn't like a, just because we're going to community, it means that that's the answer, but that the planning is incomplete without, just as it would be, right, if the tables were turned.
Mhm. Very nice. Thank you so much, Kate.
I love that strategy there of linking it, removing people from their roles and linking it to their personal experience, which now starts to like already kind of shift us into a different place. But thank you so much, Kate, for sharing that. Love it.
I wanted to check in. I saw Christy maybe in this position, and I wasn't sure if you were raising your hand because you wanted to say something. No. Okay, cool.
Just resting my head.
Cool. All right. So let me just check. Are we okay? Do you want to practice another time through? Would that be useful to you? Thumbs up? Yeah? Some nods. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay. There were enough nods and thumbs. Who's that? Oops, was I supposed to be setting up our breakout rooms? No, you were doing it.
It's all set up, and what I did is I created a breakout group room that is called Planning and Action. So half of our group, please come with me to that Planning and Action. The group that stays in this larger room with Heather will be working on immediate response and long-term strategy. Okay, and each group we're gonna have around 20 minutes. I think that we're fine on time, so 20 minutes or so. If we finish earlier, we'll come back earlier, but we'll see. So I'm gonna open up the breakout room, and I'm gonna invite 6 of you or 7 of you to, no, 6 of you to come with me to that room. So let me open the room. And whoever wants to come with me at Planning and Action, you can go into the breakout room that the dots that you have below, and choose the room. And I'm gonna try to stay here in this room, and I'll tell you once we hit like the 6, I'll let you know. First come, first serve. We have 3, 4, 5. We could welcome one more person. And then I'll move. All right.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
See you.
Hey, welcome back. Were
Yay.
you complete enough over there? I saw, look from your board, you were complete enough. Ish. Okay, cool.
That's good.
So I wanted to offer you a chance to just scan out and see what the other group came up with. Just take a moment, check out one another's work. And also just, this is a moment to offer any reflections, insights, anything that's coming up for you that you'd like to put into the whole group space.
I thought I wanted to put out there. I'm
Great.
finding it incredibly valuable to embrace polarity, but I'm also wondering what happens if we move from a dichotomy to accepting that most things are actually a spectrum.
Will you say more about what you mean by a spectrum and what it might?
Yeah, because I'm wondering whether framing things as polarities in some ways still contributes to a us versus them mentality, even though you're finding common ground, when much of the world, I think, doesn't fall into a black or white, but into a gray zone where some people might be embracing planning under certain circumstances, but action under other circumstances. Or we might be, as an institution, able to nimbly do both of those things, like plan for some things and act in others. And I guess I'm just wondering whether a spectrum brings value to this work as well.
Mhm.
Cool.
Mm.
I love that as an open inquiry and invite you to play with that more.
Well, I have to just say, I see the spectrum. If I go back to the conceptual framework that you offered very quickly
Mhm.
at the beginning, where, it's on the y-axis, it's thrive or die, and on the x-axis, it's both and, right? Inhale, exhale. That solutions are found within that continua, between the upper quadrants and the lower quadrants. So I think the experience is where we find the spectrum and where we can leverage along that spectrum in terms of solutions. So that's how I'm reading it.
Heather, I want to say something here, and it's connect. Mary, thank you so much for that sharing. This reminds me of something I have had to learn through the years using polarities, and is the importance of context, of like who is doing that polarity in that particular moment, and the timing. There is part of these polarities maps in many occasions also include, what actions can we take? What are early signs that we can see when we're once we have seen some of these upsides of both poles? And what happens with that is that because of the context that they are, then it starts developing a particularly localized, customized, that as you said, Kathy, could feel like a spectrum-like thing. Because at some points, some upsides of something of one of the poles might need more than the other, and vice versa, right? And so just to bring that up, thank you so much for such a beautiful question, Kathy. It was really it helped me talk about context better.
I see you, Mary. Mary, did you want to share?
Yeah, but I think Han had her hand up. First, go ahead, Han.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. And so what's been so useful for me so far is the iceberg, how the polarity is made by how people dig into their positions. That's what makes it a polarity, versus a spectrum. And so I thought of when the example of Dr. R and Marcus was that, what if he did a community-driven regional assessment? That's kind of a spectrum approach where he's kind of already coming with a mindset that community voices are really valuable in this assessment. So there is a spectrum, and the how of how you do things could also move us deeper into interest values, and then taking advantage of the different polarities and the best of. So yeah, and I don't know if what you're suggesting through this polarity management is trying to find good compromises. And I know people react to the word compromise because it feels like we're selling out, but is there a way to kind of find the right balance in terms of developing methodologies, how-to solutions that really feels like a win-win for everyone versus a lose-lose? I appreciate that question, Kathy.
Yeah, that's where we're headed. We're gonna
Thank
head there.
you.
I'm a plant, I know.
Mary, though, before we shift, I want to make sure we get your voice in here.
Well, I'm wondering about where time, or if you've ever spent time on talking about polarities as a particular cultural mindset that has been taught to us through the different kind of education systems that we've been in, or the moral or religious frameworks we live in, or the kind of, it's all over our culture, right? We've been swimming in this, but it is something we can unlearn. And if we spend time seeing that that's kind of a received narrative, this either or, and that it's also a very linear one, it's not something that resonates with, indigenous ways of knowing, et cetera, but that there are other ways that we can think about this that are not from one pole to another pole, which is a very architectural and linear way of thinking about that. And it's always in tension, right? Versus when we think about, win-win, or is it either solidifying your point of view, which is what we're taught to do. We're taught to dig deeper into it, versus here's a place of play. Where do we want to play within this? anyway, I'm curious around the moment, if there are moments, or if you found it useful to spend some time on the unlearning or talking about the roots of this. And I think just Kathy's question really triggered that for me. So just to build on that.
I want to respect your time. Do I have a moment to respond to that, or would you like to move on?
I was going to respond to Mary's question, but if you have something you want to offer, that's cool, but we do need to move on.
Yeah, please go ahead.
To integrate. No, is it something you could share pretty quickly?
It is all right. Thank you.
Okay. So the quick response for me, anyways, to Mary's question was about like, do we socialize this or share this? Yeah, we do sometimes. Like, it's totally contextual and depends on whether or not our sense of the group and what's possible in that moment. For the collaborations we support long term, we absolutely always just offer this as a core pattern that exists in collaborations. And sometimes we do that lightly, or sometimes we actually map some things that are, if there's really hot polarities that are causing real conflict above the iceberg, like positionally, then yeah, we're gonna spend some time offering those up. And sometimes we actually open convenings like of a new network with saying like, hey, we've had all these conversations with you before we even arrived here. Here are 3 polarities we know are going to be present in this room. And we're going to work with them over time. And so we actually just kind of introduce it right out of the gate. To get to the question of integration, this is where I just wanted to shift slightly. There were 2 core concepts that we wanted to highlight again. So back here, we're mapping a polarity. We were talking about resistance and how that might come. It's when we've experienced resistance in a group, it's often coming from the fact that there's a bias that each person, frankly, holds like a bias for one of the values in that value pair over the other. And when we hold those biases, it can create a sense of tunnel vision where we see the upsides of our preferred value and only really the downsides of our subordinated value. So the issue here is like, this is true. It is true that if I value long-term strategy, that, it makes space for relationship building. I'm going to, it's future focused. There's this possibility that comes from reimagining new futures. And it is true that, if we focused exclusively on immediate response, we're never going to get out of crisis mode. It's accurate. It's just that it's incomplete. It's not taking into account the upsides that come from that subordinated value of mine. Or maybe I'm blind to the downsides that might come if we systematically over time only attended to my preferred value. I'm not seeing the downsides that might come. So the hope here is that if we could work from a more complete picture, we can develop more integrated strategies that can honor the best of both of those values. Okay. Lizette, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is where we're getting into the work that I think I was hearing some interest in around like how do you reframe stuff? How do you integrate stuff? So that's what this work is about.
Super. Yeah. And Heather and I were very much, when we were designing today's experience for us, to when we get out of this workshop, we will know at least some things to do that are like real time. And this is one of them. So I want to walk us through reframing resistance and getting groups unstuck when we are seeing some of these polarities. And so here, number 1, when we are, something that polarities help us with is that we can see resistance now as a protection of another legitimate value or values. And so that the importance of being able to see those values is in that it can help our approach, our strategies to be stronger, better, and more sustainable. And so the invitation here, when we're thinking about reframing, when we have the lenses of polarities, is that we may find a typical view. For example, here, number one, we're able to shift a perspective. So the typical view here is, oh, that person is being stubborn or difficult or unreasonable, right? It's easy to just get stuck there in the positionality that we find ourselves in. When the polarity lens invites us to say, oh, they might be protecting something they deeply value, right? And so an example here is when someone resists a new efficiency initiative, for example, and they might be protecting something like quality, relationships, or institutional memory, right? So it's giving us information, great information, as to what our plan might be missing to be stronger and effective. Now, let's go into the second point here. The fear beneath the resistance. And we touch upon this a little bit in our maps that we just did now. But usually people resist when they are fear of losing something precious. And to be honest, in many occasions, and I've seen this in collaboratives, it's life. It feels like a death, like people are afraid of something dying, a project dying, a community being exposed to harm, and etc. Right? We could ask, what are they afraid of losing? Rather than instead say, how do we overcome their resistance? Right? When we're trying to overcome the resistance, it also has an effect that these people are not feeling seen and heard. But if we're able to understand what they're afraid of, then we can talk more and we can negotiate more, right? So for example, losing autonomy, expertise becoming irrelevant, relationships being damaged, quality decline, right? These are spaces where we can see the fear emerge and the resistance grow. Here, let's move to number 3. These are practical reframing language that can help us when we are in dialogue, when we're writing. To be honest, it even helps me with myself when my inner voice starts getting in a position that is not helping me. And so one here is like, from saying, why are you resisting this change? And maybe some of the parents here could even connect this with a child or with a spouse, right? Why are you resisting this, right? From that, we can move into what aspects of that current approach do you think are important to preserve? What aspect of what you are caring about is important to pay attention to, right? So we're looking into what has value there for the other. Another example here is we need to overcome the resistance. Rather than saying that, we could think and reframe as to what values are at stake here that we need to honor as well. So, and in this space, it's really important because for long history, we've had certain dominant views in our society, in our economic systems and all of that, at the neglect of many others that protect life, that tend to be more on collaboration, for example, right? So when we look at what values are at stake that we need to honor, it can help us really create stronger approaches to our projects, our collaborations, to the systems change we're creating. And let's move to the other one, to number 4. These can happen real time, with quick interventions when our groups are stuck or there is a stuckness in a conversation. We can bring up when there's let's say 2 people in conversation and one is going about particular thing that he's caring about and the other one, she's caring about this thing. And you can say, oh, I noticed some disagreement here, but you both are hiding really important truths. And in that space, we could even bring some positives of the upsides of both values, right? And even invite other members of the group that we are in to name some of the things positive things of both values, if the space allows it. And also to cultivate more space and conditions for both and language. In many spaces, we have the tendency to others only say either or. I'm not saying that we should never use either or, because either or is important sometimes. Like, for example, if I'm teaching my kid that this is the nose and this is the ear, I want him to realize that it's an or, it's either my nose or my ear, like to create a difference, right? So that is valuable. But we also want to cultivate the space for both and to exist as much as the, or when, depending on the context, as needed as it allows us to have and hold multiple perspectives. And also finding and noting the wisdom in both perspectives, always valuing difference, the value in the difference is super useful. So here, I want to take us into a little bit of a practice. We're going to be working in groups of 3. And first, I'm going to invite you to recall the experience of resistance that you wrote down earlier before our break, something that you experienced with a colleague or a group member. And then I'm going to invite you to go into this group, and together, you're going to be talking about the experience that you had, and you're going to try to practice how to reframe, whether it's asking questions. Well, you'll figure out as a group. And so you can take turns, you share your resistance, you see how it can be reframed, and then the other members of your group can offer thought partnership if you get stuck. All right. If you need, as a group, you can write your thoughts in the second column of the box that you had started to write earlier. If you don't want to use Mural, you don't have to. You can write in your journal or somewhere else, but it's just for your support. So I'm going to stop here and just check if there are any questions about the activity we're going to be doing now. No questions. Okay. So we're going to go in groups of 3.
I did recreate them, Luzette, unless you did already.
I did not.
I did it.
Thank you. We have just to remind you, we have the information here in Mural with what you are to do, and we also had it in the chat in case you need it. All right.
Cool. I'm opening the rooms, and again, we have about 15 or so minutes. Is that true?
Yeah, let's do 15 minutes. And please be aware of sharing the space with everyone. So 5 minutes each.
I have opened rooms. Here we go. So we've alluded to this over the last 2 hours. We are going to talk about and play with building values level collaboration. Also thinking about it in terms of like the integration of values and how to leverage them both. So I want to be clear. There are many problems to solve. One example from a network we're supporting right now. They have a problem to solve or something to solve, which is an either or proposition. Before them, they're trying to make the decision. Are they going to expand their network between 5 existing tribes? Or are they going to keep it just among those tribes for at least the next year? That is an either or choice that needs to be made. Underneath that either or proposition, though, there's lots of polarities to leverage as they navigate that, making that choice. So they're talking about, like, hey, there's this tension or this polarity between deep alignment on the programmatic work we're doing together and expanding our reach and our political influence that can come from expanding our network to include more more tribes, right? So that's just one of the sort of values tensions that they're navigating and considering as they're making an either or choice. This decision, this problem to solve. Are we expanding or not expanding? But it comes up in many other ways too. And so we wanted to offer some integration strategies and then give you a chance to check back on that that personal application that you've been working on throughout the workshop. So here we've suggested that if we think about integration, we might be able to move beyond compromise where it feels like everybody has to give up something they want to be able to better leverage the best of both of these values. And so we've offered this example here about like compromise. One way to think about it is both sides might get a little bit less of what they want. And integration might mean we could design solutions where both of the values, we could live in the upsides of both of the values a little bit more. So rather than a compromise, like a back to work or back to the office kind of compromise around like, okay, here's our hard and fast rule, 50% remote, 50% in the office, we could be asking a different question, which is how could we maximize both flexibility and collaboration, or however you want to name those polls as they might be showing up in that particular scenario. We use this a lot, the second one, with collaborations. And we think about it as taking a design criteria approach. So when a collaboration is thinking about the strategies they want to create together, the solutions they want to create together, we can come up with design criteria that any solution would have to achieve or ideally would achieve. And so that could draw from the upsides of both of our polls and say, you know, whatever solution solutions we're going to pursue, they need to get the, you know, they need to get the best of both deeply integrating community voice, context expertise, and we need to get the best from, you know, content level expertise. So you can see the example here is like whatever system we design, it's got to ensure both accountability and autonomy, or autonomy and collaboration, whatever, you know. And then the third one we wanted to offer was around both sequential, contextual, and it probably should also say structural strategies. So in many collaborations we've supported, there's only so much time and capacity, and usually money, to support a set of strategies or a set of solutions that collaboration is going to work on at any given time. And so we can, as a collaboration is generating a potential solutions that they want to implement, we could offer up a sequential, we could make an offering anyways, to be like, if you think about this sequentially, which might we emphasize over time? So what might we want to emphasize first or put most of our energy towards first? What might come second? What might come third? Or it could be contextual. So in this example here, we've like offered how different values might get expressed in different contexts or different situations. Or structural. How might we design systems that actually support the best of both of these values over time? So we wanted to give you actually an example to come back to that network example. Oh, and sorry, I didn't update. Oh, actually, it's okay. So this is the collaboration that was having that conflict. This was a quick take at a one way to define a shared deeper fear and a shared greater purpose. So
Can I just ask, are you,
oh yeah,
are,
oh, sorry.
I'm not seeing your screen, but I'm on Mural. Is everyone? Okay, you got it. Sorry.
Thank you for raising that, Julie. So I was just narrating these 3 ways of thinking about integration. And now I wanted to come back and go to that coalition scenario. So if we think about, again, now we're at like a positional level. If we thought about that position that Dr. Rodriguez was sort of embodying and the position that Marcus Isaacs is embodying, one way to express like their shared deeper fear was that climate impacts are, could be devastating vulnerable communities. All the while we're wasting resources on ineffective strategies and approaches. One way to define their shared deeper fear. One way to define their shared greater purpose, where there's probably alignment, is they really want to build genuine climate resilience, and it protects all community members, especially those that are most vulnerable. So one possible, here's several possible integration possibilities that ideally, again, are not about compromise, but a way of integrating the best of both of their sets of values. So you could take a phased approach. There could be immediate actions that are informed by existing knowledge, while the coalition continues more comprehensive planning. There could be community-based research. So residents can be part of, gathering data, informing priorities based on local vulnerabilities that they experience. Maybe there's a pilot project approach that could be taken. Or there could be parallel tracks, right? There's emergency, immediate term kinds of response systems, while simultaneously this coalition is developing longer term kind of resilience planning. One way to think about integration. So we wanted to give you a chance to spend some time back in your own scenarios, thinking about what strategies might be useful to integrate the values that are present in your current situation. So let me just check and see if that's in the chat right now, because if not, I'll add it there. Oh, and I'm sorry, I see that some things came in the chat while I was talking and I have not responded. I've not read them. So I can read them while you're in breakout rooms and we can see when we come back if there's anything to pull up from there. Before we go, are there questions about the offer?
Heather, this is Han. I'm not sure if there was a little bit of a monkey wrench in this, but we didn't get to debrief from our last conversation about someone was talking about, Kath was talking about building the big tent and how hard that is to be inclusive when there may be lack of alignment. And it occurred to me that a pattern that I'm seeing around the polarities, especially through the examples you provide for that big table, is often around the how versus the what. And I wonder if managing for polarities is different when it's around the how, because it's like usually people want control over resources and time, right? And like it's either my way or the highway. And so if there is a values alignment around the big purpose, the grand purpose, which I didn't see mentioned in your kind of steps through, if we can like go back and visit that, how does that help? In terms of doing all of the stuff that we're doing, it just reminds like we're not across purpose with each other. So sorry, I just had that as a question. Just
Han, maybe I just want to check to see if I'm understanding the question correctly, and also our own context. When we're working in collaborations, there is alignment on a shared goal. They've agreed on a shared purpose together. So there's already a container within which there's some agreement about why we're all here, what we want to accomplish together. So it is usually a question of how. How are we going to do that? And that's where the
rub happens.
that's where the rub is.
Yeah.
But I think what you're offering is like, oh, when it's before that, before you've agreed on the what.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because like I raised in the chat, like what if there are polarities around the ideology or the values level versus the actual how?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how would that, like, would you even not start with all of this that we're trying to do? Because there is an alignment around that. Okay, got it. So sorry, let's continue, but I just wanted to just share an observation and just was wondering, curious about that level of polarity.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms. We'll think on this good question. I'm going to stop my share. And we'll have about 20 minutes, but we'll cruise around and ensure that that's working for you and if you need less time. Opening the rooms. You should see the same people you were with at the last session, so you can also pick up your conversation from before. Oh, Kath, did I drop you? No. Oh, no, there. Mary and the other Mary T.
You know what? We should all just call ourselves Mary. No, I just wanted to share something from a reflection early, like when we began the session, was around how much women are caring, and also wanted just to call out that, but I don't know how everybody identifies, but that women typically are carrying a huge load and are often like overrepresented in this role. And in our small group, we talked about that this shouldn't be a solo act. This is a really, really stressful thing to do, or a very complex thing to do. And having a co-facilitator and doing this as a team is really important. So you are not both feeling alone, holding it all by yourself, but are able to help figure out how to navigate the waters that's in front of you in the room, because you have to act so nimbly and responsively and creatively, innovatively. It's a long improv act, as somebody likes to remind me, like all day. So finding ways to support each other through this work, I think is particularly important now in this moment, and particularly for women, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mary T. Any other reflections? Again, we hadn't debriefed after the reframing practice or any of the integration work. Anything coming up? Yeah.
I think this is just like extremely applicable. I found this very applicable to what I'm dealing with, and thinking about and supporting our clients and where they are. And I was already kind of conceiving of like lifting up this dynamic tension in our next gathering. So I definitely feel like this was really good timing for me. So thank you.
Sure thing. I saw you, Han.
Yeah, I'm still sitting with the getting to the and versus either or, and the difference between compromise and integration. I think regardless of anything that happens, we have to make hard choices around how we prioritize going forward. And I think it always feels better for people if they're feeling like they're not compromising on their values, right?
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing shared set of values or a line of sight that we're trying to achieve. And that's the basis for making really hard decisions in order to get to, a win-win for both. So, yeah, so I want to just appreciate that framing or like teasing it out.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Vashi?
Yeah, I had a question about overlapping or polarities that might be kind of clustering or shared. So my one that I was thinking about was action versus learning, which could be action and strategy, and also activity and rest. So I think the capacity thing is also people just working very hard and not having time or space for either the reflection or the self-care, and how you would practically manage with, is it sort of like on an analytical level, thinking about all of those things, and how you might kind of, maybe it's a bigger question than we have time for, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I love that you brought up the action and learning, because that's often one way that a lot of collaborations we support, that's how they think of themselves and talk about themselves, is action learning networks. And so even just that reframing of the language as opposed to like verses in the middle there, it's an and. And then the other, this isn't a full complete answer in any way, but one of the things that just sparked for me while you were describing that scenario, there's a network we support it's a global network. They're practitioners that are reimagining and practicing life and planet giving governance practices. And at a time where there's growing authoritarianism and violence, and like it's a community that's really stretched. And one of the things that they've prioritized as a community, as an action learning network, is to create spaces inside their network for healing and connection and just being there for one another. And when they first started out, it was all about the doing. What are the projects we're going to concretely do together? What are the actions we're going to take together? And just by like being sensitive enough and attuned enough to like what was coming up and needed in that community, they are now prioritizing that kind of community care with and for one another. And that's the kind of like nimbleness that I think is possible if we can embrace the both and collectively in these kinds of collaborations. So we know when we can really dive in and like launch some stuff or when, you know what, what's really needed now is a little bit of care and space.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to make that one offer that I had promised, and I don't, this is also maybe an incomplete or unsatisfying answer or response to Han's question from earlier. But it's got me thinking, and I love those kinds of questions. I'm like, we've been in spaces all the time when we're first forming groups, collaborations, where the question really is like, what are we doing here? What are we wanting to be and do together? And so the question of like, what's even our goal? Not so much the how are we going to achieve it, but like, what is it we want to accomplish together? We have leaned on polarities to presence the polarities that really should inform the what. And this is just that same example I referenced earlier, that now they're a network. They decided what they are, but before they decided that they even wanted to be in relationship with one another and do anything together, these were the polarities, the creative tensions that they needed. Whatever they were going to create together, it had to address these particular values in a way that honored all of them. And they had been pushed for a while to create a network, and they hadn't navigated these values. So they had been in a place of resistance for like 3 years. And so once we could surface, these are the core values that people in this group care about. How can we design, like, what do we want to be that can honor all of those? Then we could move forward. Then they could say, this is our shared goal, and then get to the how.
Mhm.
So the hope is that, or the aim here is that we're not trying to like split the difference or compromise around our values, but really figure out ways that that we can honor them all in such a way thrive.
Mhm.
Luzette, you want to do the honors closing us out?
So I want to invite us just to take a moment. We've done a lot in these past 3 hours and something. So I want to invite you just to connect with yourself, with your mind, your heart, your body, and just connect with one word that will bring an insight or takeaway from this experience. And I'm just going to give you some time, and then we can all just share, but take your time. Just one insight or takeaway after this experience together. And if you're ready, you can share. And actually, you can unmute. Sonia, would you like to go first?
Spacious flow.
Thank you. All
I
right.
can
Go ahead.
I can go next. It probably won't make sense to everyone, but I'm taking away organizational bartender, since that's sort of was the how I feel sometimes, and I had not had words for that. So thank you.
Great. Julie, name the next person.
Robin.
For me, it's all about balance. It's about finding the balance. Well, that's my takeaway.
Thank you.
How about Mary? Mary McGinnis.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm leaving with a sense of calm. So I'll pass it over to Han.
I'm thinking about cultivating possibilities. And I'll hand it to the other Mary.
I'm also feeling surprisingly, unexpectedly calmer, and we're connected. But calmer. Yeah. Thanks, other Mary, for that. Robin?
I already went.
Sorry. Kathy?
I'm thinking about polarities as possibility and bodies as barometers.
Ooh.
And I will pass it to Vash.
I am feeling very grateful for our time together, and sort of like light bulby. It's been very insightful and lots to think through. Yeah. Pass it on to who hasn't got Christy?
Yeah, possibilities revealed through process, I guess, is where I am right now. Kath?
I'm thinking about this move towards integration. I'm grateful for that concept. Sonia?
We only have Heather.
Oh,
Heather, you want to share?
Heather.
I was feeling gratitude for you all.
You got mine too. Gratitude for you all for the generosity of presence and sharing. All right, so I want to make some announcements before we go. And do you mind sharing the screen, Heather? In the mural, if you go to the mural in the bottom, in the lower side, you'll find a space to play more for homework, for, actually not homework, just for playfulness. You'll have different exercises there where we ask you to match a statement with a polarity, where we ask you to name other poles, when we ask you to match some values. So it's for you to really connect to practicing more how to do polarities, how to leverage those, how to recognize them. Sometimes a little bit hard to recognize what is underneath. And just we hope that you enjoy with that, and you have the video of the prior webinar, and you have the manual. And so thank you very much for your participation, and I hope that this was really useful for you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.
Be well.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Good to be with
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.